Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Mathghamhain Morsels, or as some people will probably call it, Cooking with Sanguine. Today's episode is going to be that chimichurri meal that I mentioned in the previous episode, and also on the Minions of the Zoo stream I was keeper of on Tuesday, just earlier today, or last night, depending on how you look at it. So, I'm going to be doing a couple different things for this meal. One is these absolutely beautiful steaks I'm going to be salting up and letting them rest for a bit before throwing them into a hot pan. And then I'll be doing everything in order of cook time. So, well, the salting and all that for this will go first. The searing off and cooking won't be for a good while. Instead, I'll finish slicing up potatoes. I'll get those tossed in some oil, some salt, and get those roasting away. I'll finish chopping up the asparagus, which I already have some of done right here, which is tossed in some olive oil and a couple different types of salt. It was a Maldon smoked salt, a Durango wood smoked salt, a black salt, a golden salt, and another smoked salt that I have. And it was just a pinch or so of each of those salts. So let me get started with salting these steaks. I'm going to start off with that Maldon smoked sea salt, which, again, I absolutely love smoky flavors. You can use any type of salt that you like. There's a lot of them out there. I recommend, if you've only ever used table salt, find a different type of salt to experiment with. You can find Himalayan pink, red alile, smoked salts, black salts. Oh, let me get one quick thing, just so that I don't have to pause for a fair bit in the middle of cooking. I'm going to throw on some gloves so I can handle the meat and keep my hands clean for when I start dealing with the veggies. So just lightly press the salt into the meat. The second salt that I'm going to be using is African pearl salt. This one is a new one that I found not terribly long ago. It's rather odd looking. It looks like smooth river rocks, very small smooth river rocks. Oh, they've come out of focus a little bit. Let's see if that works. There we go. Sorry about that. So, a little bit of that African pearl. And again, just lightly press that down into the surface. And the reason that you want to fairly heavily salt steak or any protein that you cook is you get these fantastic reactions when you're dealing with heat, fat, and salt, called the Maillard reactions, which add a good bit of depth of flavor, because there's all these compounds that are formed by Maillard reactions that aren't present before, and they add just amazing flavor to whatever meat you're cooking. Though, you can always adjust the salt level, just like everything I've said. You tailor this to your taste. One thing that you'll notice is I never use black pepper. That is because I can't stand the taste of it. It is unbelievably hot for some reason. I can eat really good, spicy Asian dishes. I can have my fajita mix, or fajita marinade, that I'll show you at some point, more likely than not, which has habaneros and jalapenos. absolutely delicious. If you make it really spicy, which I have several times, it can take the top off a lot of people's heads. I can eat that, no problem. Love it. But black pepper absolutely kills me. So, if you're a fan of black pepper, add black pepper to the dishes that I make. It'll go well. I just don't like it, so I don't use it. So, next thing that I'm going to do is just finish having the potatoes that I have here. And as I was saying when I was doing some of this prep work in the stream, if you have any bad spots on your potatoes, just cut them out. These are fairly small potatoes, so I'm just going to chop them in half, and I have a bowl of water next to me. So after I chop them in half, I'm just tossing them into the bowl of water. That'll keep them from oxidizing, which spoils the taste a little bit. Definitely spoils the presentation, because they end up this rather disgusting brownish gray. This is a real good example of a bad spot in the potato. I could feel that that was a bit soft, cut into it, and as you can see, it has that really nasty looking section. So just cut until you don't have it. This potato will probably end up just finishing cut up like that. Take off a little bit of the end and a little bit of here. And this will just go into the water as is, because that's about half the size it started out with the bad bits cut out. So these are going to be halved. Then I'm going to pull them out of the water that I have them sitting in, pat them dry, and throw on some good cooking fat. For those, I'm going to end up using some beef tallow that I've rendered out, and I'll probably show you guys how to render out beef tallow at some point, if you don't already know. Beef tallow is beef fat. So kind of think lard is to pigs as beef tallow is to cows. And just like lard has a lot of flavor, goes amazingly when you're baking pies or when you're making pork dishes, frying off in a bit of lard. Oh, that's good. Same thing when you're doing beef tallow. It adds a lot of beefy flavor, and it's a good way of getting some additional flavor in potatoes and greens. As I said in the stream that I was in earlier, the Minions of the Zoo stream, the way that I determine how much of the asparagus stock I'm going to end up trimming off, because you always want to trim off a little bit due to the woody ends, is I feel it, and there's a certain point where the texture changes enough as I'm pressing down that I can tell that's where the woodiness ends. And when I cut it, it'll have this nice texture inside. So same thing for this one. You'll have different amounts that you have to cut off certain stalks. You can just guesstimate beforehand, but I find this way I get to preserve more of the stock. And I'm just going to have these and throw them into the oil and salt. I'll be tossing those around in there just to make sure that they get completely coated. Just kind of wiggle them around, toss it around, make sure that you get a nice coating on those. And then I'm going to start working on some mushrooms as well. But first, let me drain off the potatoes so that I can get those patted dry get them oiled up, salted, and into the oven. And while I'm doing that, I'll make sure that this camera is uncovered in my kitchen. So, in order to drain my potatoes, I'm just going to use a fine mesh strainer / sieve. And I'm sure I don't need to explain the process of draining potatoes to anyone. Seems a very easy concept. You just pour it through the sieve, let the potatoes be stopped, water flow through, and then, as I said, I'm going to pat them dry a bit. That way, when I toss on the oil and salt, it actually has something that it gloms onto, because oil and water do not mix at all. Unless, of course, you have a compound in it that is able to bond the two, but that I'll tell you more about when I show you a salad dressing or something like that. Because you can get emulsifying agents that do wonders for your salad dressing, keep them from separating out real quick. And just kind of roll the potatoes around, pat them off, make sure that you get all the surface moisture off. So that you'll be able to coat them up with some oil, coat them up with salt, or in this case it's going to be that tallow, like I said, so I won't actually be oiling the potatoes right away. I'll just be throwing some of that tallow into the pan to melt, and the pan is currently in an oven that I preheated to 400 degrees. A little bit of a bad spot that I missed earlier on, so let me just cut that out. Ooh, that is a big bad spot. And be careful whenever you're using a knife. You want to cut away from yourself. There are times where you won't see me do so. That's me being a bit naughty when it comes to making sure that I'm using the knife safely. I've gotten so used to the knives that I use, and I always keep in mind where my hand is, but you will make mistakes at some point if you've done, or if you do that and you're using a dull knife. My knives I tend to keep very sharp, which it seems like it would be the other way. A sharp knife would be dangerous, but a sharp knife, you don't have to put force behind your cuts, so you end up actually being much safer with a very sharp knife than you would be with a duller knife. And once these are all dried and looking good, I will swap over camera views to my kitchen and pull out my preheated tray that, again, as I said, is in a 400 degree oven. We'll cut out some of the tallow that I have, throw that into the tray, salt the potatoes, throw them in, and get them roasting away in the oven. So let me just click over to that camera feed. And here we go. So let me adjust the view slightly. So on my stovetop, you can see a number of my cast irons, and those will, for the most part, all be used, with the exception of a stack in back. Those aren't going to really come into play today, but the two up front definitely are. into the kitchen. Set this down. Gonna try to escape. Okay. So now then, as I said, let me get an oven mitt. And I'm actually not going to be using a baking tray, I'm going to be using another cast iron. I forgot that I had decided that earlier. So my cast iron has already been preheated and is up to a good 400 degrees. Potatoes are going in dry at the moment, so I'm going to be adding some of that lovely beef tallow that I mentioned. Oops. Mushroom wanted to jump in as well, but those will be dealt with here shortly. Throw all my potatoes in. And now, beneath this plate of steak is my container of beef tallow. Like I said, beef tallow is to cows what lard is to pigs. So it's just rendered down beef fat. This has been rendered down and then cooled, which is why I'm able to cut it and it's in my mouth. And just put a good bit of cooking fat in this. If you don't have beef tallow, you can substitute this for a lot of different things. You can substitute it for some olive oil. If you have a preferred oil, rapeseed oil, some canola oil, anything like that will do. Any cooking fat that you like the flavor of will do wonders in this. Move that back over there. Get my oven mitt. And you want the potatoes to be fairly well coated. So just give them a little mix around, give them a toss. And then I'm going to add some Maldon salt to the mix again. This again can be substituted for whatever type of salt you like the most. For me, it's that smooth flavor that really does it. This back into the oven, roasting away, and I'll see you guys back at my desk. Okay, so back at my desk, let me start sectioning up some mushrooms. These I've already mostly brushed clean. Few little specks, doesn't matter. We'll occasionally have a little bit that doesn't want to come off. Easy. You can be as neat with this as you want. You can make sure that you clean them entirely so that there isn't a speck of anything. Every now and then you'll see a big speck that managed to cling. You can get rid of it. But that is entirely up to how much you want to work. I always give them a wiping off, a brushing off. Try to get anything big. And we're just going to be quartering these. Get a nice little pile off to the side. So those potatoes that I threw in, are going to be cooking for a little bit. I want them to get some color on the side that's down against the cast iron. And then I'll be tossing them around, making sure that they get some more color on all the other faces as well. But these will go in partway through the potato being cooked. The mushrooms will go in partway through. Once the potatoes are most of the way done, then I'm going to be adding in some of that chimichurri that I made yesterday. Let me explain how I did one thing that you're going to see later on, which is I made a chimichurri butter for the steak. I've already made and cooled some of this, so I'll be using the one that I've already cooled and set aside, which is brilliantly green, smells amazing, but the one that I'll show you how to make is very simple. You just need a good bit of butter. The more meat that you have, the more butter you'll need. But we'll start with a good bit of butter. I'm just using a really good sweet cream salted butter. And then, of course, to make the chimichurri sauce, or chimichurri butter, rather, you'll need that lovely chimichurri that I made yesterday. And as I said, when you're storing the chimichurri, you want to add a fair bit of oil onto the top because that helps keep it from oxidizing. So, as you can see, there's a good bit of oil on top of this. All you do is tilt it to one side, let the oil kind of flow off, and then get in there and grab as much of the chimichurri as you want. That should be plenty. Now then, to keep from blinding with the metal of my knives, let me readjust my light again so that it isn't shining straight down. And as this sits in the refrigerator, that oil layer will solidify. That is exactly what you want. You want it to be effectively the cap on your chimichurri. And all you do then is, when you want some chimichurri, you brush that cap of olive oil off to the side and get the amount of chimichurri that you want, brush it back over top, and it's good to go. So while I'm just working this, and I'll be mashing it down in, slicing the butter, mashing, scooping it up, doubling it over. As I'm doing this, let me explain something. I saw a couple comments on the video saying that I should explain a number of the tools that I mentioned vaguely in the other video. I mentioned sous vide in particular. Sous vide is a cooking style that, sous vide, if I remember correctly, means under vacuum. And the sous vide cooking style is you vacuum seal whatever you're trying to cook. And you put that in a body of water, a bowl of water, a pot of water, however you have it set up, that is heated up to a specific temperature. This is done by a device like what I have, which is an immersion circulator. Or you have some larger internal sous vide machines. But it heats the water up to a specific temperature that you set. It's below boiling. And it can only ever cook whatever you put in it up to a certain level of doneness. It can't go past it. So if you put in the specific temperature, you set your immersion circulator to medium rare, for example, for a steak. You can put your steak in, and you can have it go for a long time. You can have it go for 8 hours. I've done that before. Put in a steak before I head off to work or before I go to sleep. I work nights, so my sleep cycle is a bit weird. But put a steak in, let it cook as you're off at work or as you're asleep. When you get home, you pull it out. It'll look really anemic because sous vide, while it cooks everything perfectly, it doesn't sear anything. It just cooks everything, every bit of whatever you put into it, to that specific temperature. So when you have the steak in there as medium rare, that steak is medium rare throughout the entire steak. From the very surface of it to the very core of it. There's no difference. So what you do is after you've sous vide your piece of meat, you then will throw it into a hot cast iron or hot pan of your choice. You want it to be really hot because all you want to do is you want to quickly sear the outside. And while I've been talking, this compound butter has finished. So all I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it in a small container and then stick it in my freezer for a little bit to set up because it's rather soft as you work it. But once you let it set up, you can use it to finish all kinds of things. You guys are going to see me use compound butter to finish the steaks that I have for my dinner tonight. And it will be absolutely delicious because it gets all those flavors of the chimichurri, adds some richness, some unctuousness from the butter. It'll be fantastic. And the little bit of juice that you might see me scraping up, as well as what was pressed down into the surface of my cutting board as I was making the compound butter, is that little bit of sauce at the bottom of the chimichurri that I was mentioning. So this just goes straight into the freezer, and it'll stay there for a little bit until it sets up and is nice and firm. Now it's time to toss around the potatoes again, so let me flip over. And those potatoes. They've been in there for a bit. They're starting to get some color on the exposed surface. When it's been down, just very light golden. Mix those around, make sure that they're entirely coated in that tallow that is entirely melted down. Make sure that they're covered in the salt that you added in. And then give it another little shimmy. Throw that in. I also have in my oven, which you can't quite see, so I can pull it out, a really nice cast iron griddle. And that's what I'm going to be throwing the asparagus and mushrooms on. And because that has also just been sitting in the oven the entire time, it is already up to temperature. I don't need to worry about that. Though I did have a spear of asparagus try to escape, so I'll have to fish that out. I'm sorry if the sound getting louder and softer is disorienting for anyone. I'm moving closer and further from my mic as I go through this process. So let's see if I can find that spear that tried to escape. Where did you go? Then you want your asparagus spears to be on one layer. That way they all get some coloration. And you want your mushrooms, because I also threw those in on the griddle, to also be in one layer to get some color and roast up nicely. And the mushrooms I'm just going to very simply hit with some salt. The spears have already been hit with some salt, so I don't need to worry about them in it. And I'll throw on a little bit of tallow onto my cast iron griddle as well, just to get that added little bit of deliciousness. So again, just grabbing the tallow up and slicing some of it off. And that's just going to go into the center of the mushrooms, so that it can melt down in around the mushrooms. The mushrooms can get that nice beefy flavor from the tallow. And I'll be keeping the tallow out because that's also going to be what I sear off my steaks. And I think rather than some maldon, I'm going to use some pink Himalayan for my mushrooms. So just grind that on top. And throw that tray back into the oven. And unfortunately that one segment of asparagus spear escaped a bit too far, so that's going to have to be thrown out. Now then, it is almost time for the steak to start going, but not quite. I already have both these cast irons on heat. They're both on medium-low. Actually, this one is on low, medium-low. Now it's back up to medium-low. The other one is on medium-low. And those will be where I cook the lovely scallops that I have, as well as my 2 steaks. Start breaking out my scallops. So the order is going to be, once the potatoes and asparagus and mushrooms are most of the way done, they're going to come out, be tossed around again, make sure that they get color on all their surfaces. Then the steak is going to go in next, because the steak will take a bit of time and we'll have to rest for a few moments after. And then, after that, it'll be the beautiful scallops, which will just need a quick searing off. And that quick searing off won't take terribly long. It'll give some absolutely beautiful color. And I think I might use a bit of my beef tallow in that as well. I really love beef tallow, so that will be used as often as I need a cooking fat in this meal. With the exception of the asparagus was just done with some extra virgin olive oil. Any type of extra virgin olive oil does well. This is the one that I have. It's just our Member's Mark. It's fairly cheap, but it works. The flavor's there. It does amazing things to the food. So I will come back to you guys in a few moments when the potatoes, the asparagus, and the mushrooms are done. Okay, so welcome back. For you guys, it was just a moment. For me, it was about 5 to 7 minutes plus or minus. So, as I said, once the potatoes are just starting to be fork tender, that's when I want to add the chimichurri. So all I did was I threw a little bit of that chimichurri sauce into a metal bowl. And then I'm going to take these nice, hot, roasted potatoes, toss them into the bowl as well. Toss and stir with my tongs. Make sure that all the potatoes are coated in that lovely, lovely sauce. And I wish you guys could smell this, because right now those hot potatoes on that sauce are just causing all kinds of beautiful, beautiful smells. Cilantro, garlic, really in there. So, just stirring that around with the tongs. Trying to get all the potatoes a bit coated with it. You can add as much to this as you want, as much cilantro or as little cilantro. It is entirely personal taste. And then what I decided to do is, I think what will really be amazing on these potatoes is just a little bit of cotija cheese. So I'm just going to sprinkle some cotija on top of the potatoes, just like that. Give them another, just stir around. Make sure that they're coated with cheese and cilantro. And then these are going right back into that skillet to finish roasting up. And let me grab my oven mitt. Lift this up so that all you can see. So as I said, nice coloration on the potatoes. Now that cilantro and cotija has been added, let me pull the griddle out. And I'll be adding some of my fantastic chimichurri to this as well. So the mushrooms are looking beautiful right now. Just roasting up amazingly. The cilantro, the asparagus, sorry, still thinking about that cilantro smell. It's absolutely amazing. The asparagus is getting some coloration on it. It's also just fork tender in some of the big pieces, which is when you want to add any sort of chimichurri to them. The reason why you add at this point and not earlier is earlier on, if you added it right away, you would have ended up burning the garlic and burning the cilantro as you cooked. Whereas this will just marry together and be amazing. It won't burn, it'll just coat and perfume. The asparagus does amazing with acid. It needs that little bit of acid, really. That's why a lot of asparagus recipes are asparagus, lemon, garlic, some herbs. This is the same thing, only this is asparagus, lime, garlic, and cilantro. And it is absolutely amazing. And again, just the smell, once the chimichurri hit the asparagus, oh, that was delicious. And like I said, taste everything as you go. I said that in the chimichurri, that you need to taste, you need to experiment, you need to give it a go. We're going to put the mushrooms on this as well, plus those around with it. So we put chimichurri on those. Get all the flavors to start playing together right now, because that way, by the time they hit my plate, oh, it'll be amazing. And like I said, it's when the potatoes and the asparagus just start to get fork tender that you want to add the chimichurri. The chimichurri on the mushrooms that are getting that nice caramelization on the outside. Oh, so good. And now, because the chimichurri has just gone on those, that's probably the point that everyone's been waiting for. That beautiful steak over there just needs some towel. Actually, we'll start with a dry pan on the steak. Set them in, and that sizzle is exactly what you want to hear. Oh man, it already smells amazing. So let it sit for a little bit. Just enjoy the smells. Enjoy the sound of that hiss. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of my beef tallow. Just a nubbin of it. That goes in and around the steak. It'll just add that next level of beef flavor. Because when it comes to cooking, fat is flavor. So you want that tallow. You want a nice fatty piece of meat, because that's where all the flavor is. then about the time that that's ready to flip is when I'm going to start throwing my scallops in, which means that I need to get a bit more of that tallow. A bit smaller piece than I threw in with the steaks. Throw that in here. There's my other little cast iron that's been heating up. Let that melt. Going to turn up the heat a little bit in that one. This burner unfortunately doesn't work quite as well as the other one. So every now and then I need to get a bit more juice than I would with the good one. And now you want to just slightly lift up. And if the meat's coming up with it, it'll be just very slightly full. Then it'll be seared beautifully. You never want to have to really fight with the meat in order to get it to come up. If you're fighting with it, it's stuck to the pan, and normally when it's stuck to the pan, that means it's not quite hot enough. It's not quite done. It's not done caramelizing. So give it just that little moment longer. And I'm just coating the bottom of this with that tallow. Okay. A bit more. Get at these lovely, lovely scallops. Put them straight down into that tallow that I've melted down in. Straight down to the syrup. You always want to keep in mind that you need to make sure you don't overcrowd a pan. So as you're adding things to the pan, keep in mind how much space do they have. If there's not enough room for you to see all the way around each scallop, and it to have a healthy little border space in between it and its nape, then hold off on adding more. Wait until the ones in your pan already are done. And just like the steak, you don't want to really be fighting to pull these up. If you're fighting, it hasn't quite finished searing off. Man, delicious, delicious smell on the inside. You want to touch your meat as little as you possibly can, and yes, I know that sounds like an innuendo, but trust me, the more that you fiddle with it, the drier it gets, which dry meat, never good. And that works with both the innuendo and the normal. So just let those sit, sear, sizzle. Enjoy the smells that fill your kitchen. So, as I said, the steaks we're going to finish off with some chimichurri butter. The scallops we're also going to get some chimichurri in. Because I want this meal that I'm cooking right now to show you a bunch of different uses for chimichurri sauce. It's not just something that goes really well with steak. It's not just something that goes amazing on seafood like scallops and shrimp and salmon and tuna. Or, yeah, tuna and trout. That was the one I was thinking of when I said tuna. But it will go amazing on tuna as well. It's not just something that you can use for your potatoes and your asparagus. You can use it on damn near anything. I've done chimichurri pork, chimichurri chicken, lamb. I've done chimichurri as just a real simple pasta dressing, effectively. Do some shrimp in chimichurri, throw in some angel hair pasta. That's amazing. It's not at all traditional, because that's two entirely different types of cooking, or regions of cooking, nationalities, I suppose is the best way of phrasing it. But fusion food is fantastic. It works. It's delicious. So you'll see me touch the steaks as they're cooking. That's just because I learned how to tell the doneness of a steak by poking it. You can use a meat thermometer if you want. A lot of people do. Not a problem. Does its job. I'll use meat thermometers in bigger cuts. But the steaks, I learned by just poking it. A little crispy bit that fell off. It's delicious. And you want to sear off on all the faces of your steak. Some of these scallops are getting some nice color on them. Some are very anemic. So what I'm going to do is move the anemic ones over, just to give the ones that stay in that little pan some extra room. Because like I said, you don't want to overcrowd, and I might have just slightly overcrowded in that first pan. But since I have two pans going, that is not a problem. That is very easily fixed. That steak looks good. That steak looks beautiful as well. What I'll do is I'll go picture in picture over here. And let's see, I want that way. So you can see those beautiful, beautiful steaks. Some of my chimichurri butter out and just slather that on the steak. Butter is an amazing way to finish a steak. It adds a little bit of shine to it, adds a little bit more flavor, just does absolutely amazing things. said, that one burner is not quite as good as this one. So we can just going to transition all these lovely scallops over into this better burner. That way I can get that coloration that I want on the scallops. Oh God, the smell. I love scallops, and the smell when they hit that hot tallow. Oh, it's amazing, that beefy smell of the fat with that delicate, sweet smell of the scallop. Kind of broke as I lifted it up. Absolutely lovely, briny, sweet taste. Scallop. And always remember, when you're cooking any piece of meat, you always want to give that meat time to rest. We've got just a little bit on that part of the subject. There we go. You always want to give it time to rest before you start cutting into it. Because if you don't, you'll just let all the juices run out. So be patient when you're cooking. Even though it smells amazing, you want to eat it right now. Give it time. Oh. Ooh. Those potatoes, so good. I don't even care that I burnt my mouth ridiculously. Oh, that's delicious. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, like I said, I want cilantro and everything. So I use the chimichurri butter as a finishing butter for the steaks. But I'm going to throw that in with the scallops while they're just finishing cooking. So scallops too can get that amazing chimichurri flavor just worked in around them. And I have a couple more scallops, so I'll save just that little bit that's in here. Move that around so the juices and the chimichurri can just touch everything. and again, you'll just see me following my advice of tasting it. That's exactly what I'm doing. It's not just snacking on the amazing potatoes. I'm just tasting it, making sure that all the flavors are in the right balance. Get those in the bowl. There we go. Steaks out. Potatoes are out. Most of the scallops are out. And again, just the smells that you will get while you're cooking this. Oh, they're amazing. So then, because the skillet that I was using to cook has a lot of that oil and flavor in it right now, it'll just be a little bit too much to start searing off the scallops. I'm going to use the cast iron that just came out of the oven. The potatoes still has some of the fantastic beef tallow in the bottom. I'm going to use that to finish off. The remainder of my scallops. Oh, and one thing that I do kind of want you guys to notice, partially because it's a little bit of bragging from me, but also because it's something to bear in mind. This beautifully smooth cast iron bottom, that's in just a normal lodge skillet. Many of you, anyone that knows cast iron effectively, has ended up having to deal with a lodge skillet before. They don't look that nice when you first get them. They're kind of rough bottom. They haven't been ground down. You don't need to do anything all that special. As you use the skillet, as you get it oiled up, as you continue to scrape it clean and oil it up and season it when it needs more seasoning, the bottom will just get smoother and smoother until you have this absolutely fantastic finish on your skillet. And that's just due to cast iron used to be a lot more popular. When cast iron was at its height, a lot of finished cast iron skillets that were buffed up on the bottom, they were absolutely beautiful works, were produced. Cast iron fell out of popularity in favor of steel pans, in favor of stainless steel, in favor of non-stick. So what happened? Well, all the money that was going into finishing these old cast iron pans, making sure that they had this nice, smooth, beautiful bottom to them, well, that stopped being as profitable. That's the chimichurri, asparagus, and those roasted mushrooms. that I did that just came out. So the oven can come off. Just going to keep the stovetop going until these last 5 scallops are done. So they ended up, the company that survived, the main one that survived, was Lodge. And what Lodge did was Lodge didn't spend all that time, all that money, finishing the bottom. They sold really good, durable skillets. Really good, durable cast iron in general. I have no complaints with Lodge, except for they could finish up the bottom a bit better, because it's rough when you get a Lodge for the first time. But in time, that roughness goes away, your skillet becomes your own, it picks up your character, it picks up how you use it. Cast iron is effectively the cookware that learns how it's used. The more care you take with your cast iron, the better everything comes out. If you really pay attention to it, treat it right, make sure that it doesn't get wet and stay wet, you go through the effort of drying it out, you go through the effort of re-seasoning it, of working with it. Cast iron won't treat you wrong. Let's check those are done. Guess I'll only get these 4 in one go. There's that. And I forgot to mention one thing that I prepared a while ago. As I mentioned, I do sous vide a lot. One of the things that I did was I sous vide up some corn. That corn was sous vide with black garlic, white garlic, roasted garlic, some other spices, including a little bit of smoked paprika, some ancho chili, some cayenne, some Mexican red chili. And what I'm just going to do is I have that just sitting off to the side. I'm going to finish that up in a hot skillet. And that's going to be the last bit of my meal I'm going to show you guys today. And I'm just going to keep moving it, make sure it gets some of that beautiful tallow butter on it. Round, let it get some color on it. And I think that will be the perfect final addition to this meal. those scallops. Those scallops are absolutely amazing. You get that cilantro, garlic from the chimichurri, that lime juice that really just picks up the natural sweetness of the scallop. That little bit more. And this corn is going to be, like I said, just the perfect final element to this meal. You can do this corn a bunch of different ways. You can boil it. That's fairly common. Boil the corn, then finish it off in a cast iron. You can just grill it the entire way. Grilled corn, oh my god, that's delicious. And that you start before you shuck it. Start grilling it, then partway through the grill, shuck it, throw it back on, let it get some more color on it, let it get some nice little char lines, hit it with some butter, slap it back on for a few moments longer. You can go for a complete street corn, get the corn, hit it with some different sauces. You can top it off with some cojita cheese, melt the cheese down onto it, let it get nice and crispy, or just hit it right at the end with some of that cheese. Let the salt from the cheese just pick it up a little bit more. However you like corn, works beautifully. If you don't want it on the cob, you can just take it off the cob, cook it up how you want, throw in some of the cilantro, throw in some chimichurri with it. Oh, chimichurri corn is good. Just keep on dancing this around, let it get the right amount of color on it. So I'm getting a bit impatient, it's already done. So I'm going to say this is my chimichurri presentation for you guys. This is my demonstration of a bunch of different things, all in one meal. Each piece of this, with the exception of the corn right now, has been hit with chimichurri at some point along in the cooking. Whether it's at the very end in a finishing butter, like those two steaks, whether it's partway through the cooking and just straight chimichurri with a little bit of cojita, like the potatoes, if it's partway through the cooking in the asparagus and the mushrooms, if it's towards the end in the chimichurri butter thrown in with the scallops to just give it that little bit of extra oomph. And of course, you can have chimichurri in what is perhaps the most traditional of ways, just on the side. Use that chimichurri as a dipping sauce. I think I'm going to let all of you guys go, because I have an absolutely amazing plate of food in front of me now, and I'm hungry. So, I was told I need to come up with an ending line. So how about, for an ending line, explore food, play with it, try different things. If you don't know of a reason why flavors wouldn't work together, try them. If there's something that you've always been curious, try to make it. A dessert that you had once that you've never been able to find again, see if you can remember how. See if you can remember the flavors that go into it, and figure out, how exactly do I get those flavors there? Just explore. Have fun. Enjoy making your food. Enjoy eating your food. Enjoy exploring. There's plenty of tastes out there. Find all of them that you can. Have a good one. And I hope that you try at least something that I made here. Bye all.